electricity and gas from Iran, but it expires on May 5th.
It's not in the best interest of Iraq to comply with the US economic sanctions on Iran. At the same time, it can't side with Iran and risk losing a strong ally like the United States. Therefore, we shall see the Iraqi government holding the stick from the middle when it comes to policy with both Iran and the US.
The Iraqi president has called the relationship between Iraq and Iran a, quote, fixed principle. No matter what the Trump administration does in the next 2 months, it's clear both countries are hoping the United States gets the message. Natasha Ghanem, Al Jazeera, Baghdad.
Afshin Shahi with us now, Senior Lecturer in International Relations and Middle East Politics at the University of Bradford. He's on Skype from Leeds. Nice to see you, Afshin. Relations between Iraq and Iran, can they operate outside of the United States? They should be able to. They're the neighbours, aren't they?
Yes, they are neighbors. And you know what is so interesting? Just before the official visit of President Rouhani starting in Iraq, the Iranian authorities and the Iranian president himself in particular has been going on about the fact that the American president in December only could visit Iraq under the cover of darkness, just to go to an American military base for a few hours to take a few pictures and then immediately kind of leaving the country. And now President Rouhani says that despite all the pressures that, there is now an official visit, and obviously this visit is not only going to be extremely important on the domains of security, politics and economy, but it is also extremely important symbolically for both countries, in particular for Iran, which has been facing with a lot of difficulties, economic difficulties over the last few months.
But how does it potentially affect the US-Iraq relationship? Because we know that Iran is the bogeyman of the Middle East. The United States will pin pretty much any problem in the Middle East on something to do with Iran. If Iraq cozies up to them more, what does it do to the dynamics?
You know what is so interesting? The American kind of attempt to minimize Iranian influence both in the region and particularly in Iraq over the last few months have been ironically counterproductive. As the result of American sanctions on Iran and as the result of the collapse of Iranian currency, rial, Iranian goods and Iranian services are now even more attractive, certainly in countries like Iraq. In October, ironically, Iraq overtook China as Iran's prime non-oil export market. At the moment, basically, the volume of trade between the two countries is around $12–13 billion. But both countries are absolutely determined that even despite the challenges, despite the American pressure, they can reach that to $20 billion. Of course, America is constantly kind of pressurizing the Iraqi authorities to at least minimize their dependency on Iranian gas. But at the same time, they know that if they kind of enforce too much pressure on Iraqi authorities, it may lead to some civil unrest. We know that basically electricity shortages and gas shortages in Iraq have been a serious issue, and certainly over the last few months, over the last few years, it has created a lot of tensions on the streets in Baghdad and Basra and so many other cities. So basically, in this very specific situation, the Americans are between basically the rock and the hard place. So there is a limit to how far they can go, and certainly there is a limit to how far they can actually increase their pressures on Iraq in this very fragile moment.
Afshin Shahi joining us from Leeds. Great to talk to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Kamal. Thank you.
Around 15,000 people have marched on the streets of Moscow protesting against a proposed new law which would restrict the internet. While